Model railroad, nothing like it. Rolling a string of cars in the yard here. Hi, Mike White, and I'm with the Watertown Area Model Railroad Club, and today we'd like to show you why model railroading is fun. With the help of Art Mahan over here and the A&M Hobbies and members of the Watertown Area Model Railroad Club, we're going to show you different aspects of the hobby. And hopefully you'll get interested and become a model railroader. Stay with us, won't you? Another former officer and club member has been in railroading for, well, quite a while now, I'll tell you. Dave's been in the historical societies and railroading in the area for many years. Dave Cummings. And Dave's going to tell you a little bit about the history of our club. Dave?
Thanks, Mike. Back in the mid-'80s, Art Mahan, who owns the hobby shop, put a list up in his store to see if there was anybody interested in signing up to join a railroad club. And he got quite a few people to sign up for it. So we met at a local insurance company, decided there was enough interest for a club, got a constitution together, some bylaws together, and started the first Watertown Area Model Railroad Club. At that time we had about 10 members, but we didn't have any place to put a layout. So that, of course, was our big problem. Where are we going to find a place that we can put up something and keep it in a somewhat permanent status? Well, we never did find a place, and we've sort of been gypsies ever since then. We've moved all around the area. We were in the Boy Scout office at one time. We've been in the basement of some of the buildings downtown. Some store owners have let us use unused rooms in their places. And currently we are in this place under Woolworths where we are somewhat semi-permanent, as much as I guess you can say we ever were in our life. Down here we have a 20 by 44 foot area where we can show off our model trains. We certainly invite you to come down and see them. If you have some trains of your own, want to bring them down, we'll give them a chance to run them on our layout. If you are at all interested in model railroading, we certainly would welcome you to join our club even. We meet Wednesday nights down here, 7 o'clock. We have fellowship, we have train talk, we run trains, we talk about the latest products in the hobby, what's good, what's bad, what you can do. If you've got a problem, we can maybe solve it for you, because a lot of our members probably have gone through the same thing you're wondering about. How do I do this? How do I do that? Many of us have already done some of those things that can help you out. So we certainly would welcome you to join us any Wednesday or any Saturday down here underneath Woolworths. One of the facets of model railroading which is very interesting to a lot of people are models of particularly locomotives or cars that are made out of brass. The locomotive that is showing up in front of the camera now is a brass locomotive, and it was made in Korea and painted by a person in Massachusetts, and it's a Pennsylvania Railroad mountain class locomotive. And if you'll notice that it has very fine detail. It has marker lights with little jewels in them. It has the typical Pennsylvania Railroad paint scheme and the lettering. You'll notice that the side rods and the valve gear, the detail on top of the boiler and on the sides and underneath is very intricate. And that's one of the things that makes the brass locomotives desired by collectors and expensive, because of the time it takes to do that sort of detail. Here we have a brass locomotive which has not been painted. This is also a Pennsylvania Railroad M1A. You'll notice that this one is a little different. It's a little more modern version of the same locomotive. It has a longer tender. This one is not painted, but you can still see the detail. This particular one was made in Japan. And these locomotives, or the brass locomotives and cars, many people collect them and don't ever paint them. And they use them for display only. Some people like to have them painted in the correct paint schemes and numbering systems and still only display them. They're the kind of thing that I don't run often because they are delicate
and they're just too expensive to be out with every day. But they are beautiful. When they run correctly, they run like a little piece of clockwork. But they just have a desirability from a collector's standpoint, and they are the kind of the ultimate expression of the detailer's art. Now next we have a locomotive which represents passenger travel about 100 years before either of the brass locomotives. The brass locomotives represent about, say the early 1930s. This locomotive is the John Bull, which was made in England in 1831 and brought to this country and used, and ultimately was, the original is now in the Strasburg Railroad Museum in Pennsylvania. You notice that the whole John Bull train is only about as long as the Pennsy M1 Mountain with the coast-to-coast tender behind it. These models are built to the same scale, but that just shows you the relative difference in development of the power over the years. 100 years apart is what we're looking at. We have another locomotive here, which is a little bit more a New York State native. This is the DeWitt Clinton. And you'll notice that this is also a product of the 1831. And the coaches are basically stagecoach bodies, which have been put on frames with flanged wheels. And again, you can see the difference in the size of the DeWitt Clinton with the brass Pennsy Mountain in the back. Again, it's the same scale model, but it's just things were a lot smaller back in the old days.
Now, one of the most important aspects of model railroading, of course, is holding the train together. Switching, coupling, uncoupling, and the most important thing about that is your coupler system. Now, most all these standard kits and locomotives come with what they call the horn hook coupler. Now, this is the horn hook coupler on the end of this boxcar here, and as you can see, it doesn't look very realistic and unfortunately not very reliable. However, if you're serious about model railroading, as we try to be here in the club, the KD coupler is the coupler of choice. It looks more like a real railroad knuckle coupler, and it works on a magnetic system. Really reliable and quite simple to operate. We'll show you here on the layout. The key to the whole KD uncoupling system, of course, is the magnet, and that's all it is a magnet, and it sets in between the rails of your track. You glue it right to the ties here. We have white dots showing where the location of the magnet is in the yard, so we know where to stop our train to couple and uncouple it. Now I'm going to back the car over it, and you watch the end of the car and you'll see how the magnet pulls the coupler over to one side. See how it does that when it goes over the ramp? Over that magnet, see, watch it pull it over. See how that works? And notice the coupler, how prototypical it looks, like a real railroad knuckle coupler too, as we said before. See, it pulls that coupler right over there. All right, now, when we back the train over here and we stop two cars over the ramp, it pulls one magnet, or the magnet pulls one coupler one way and one coupler the other way. So we have an uncouple, just like that. Now, when we push back, we can hit that car and push it down the track to an industry, say, and leave it, pull away from it, and the coupler will automatically center itself again. So when we come back to pick that car up again, we can just back right back in on it, couple right up, and pull her right out of the yard, just like that. No problem to it. As long as it's moving over the ramp, it won't uncouple. As soon as you stop and take a little slack, that's when the magnetic effect works, as you see right there. And it really works well. If you're serious about railroading, this is definitely the only kind of a coupler system to have, the KD system. Okay, we've been talking about the KD uncoupler system, and we're here with club member Ron Johnson. He's going to demonstrate about how to install a KD number 5. Now, here's what they look like when you go to the hobby shop. You get enough to do 2 cars in one of these packs. This is the number 5 coupler, which is the standard coupler that we use on just about all our installations. Ronnie's going to be working with a Athearn caboose. This is your Athearn caboose kit that would come in a box similar to this. This is probably the standard of the industry as far as the cars go. This is a specially done car for Ronnie, and he'll explain to you a little bit about the car and about how easy it is to put the KD system on it. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Okay, first of all, in order to install a coupler, you're going to need a few tools. And among those tools, you're going to need a greasem, which is the graphite that makes the knuckle on the coupler work. You're going to need some files. You're going to need a KD set of pliers to bend the trip pin or draft pin. And you also should have, in a model railroad, it should never be without, is NMRA gauge. Okay, this is used for gauging your wheels so that they'll be standard on the track, and they will have less probability of derailing. Okay, our ultimate goal here is to put on the KD coupler, okay, and a sample of that is a finished product, is this boxcar with the coupler installed. Now, one of the main other tools that you should have when you use when you install KD couplers is the KD coupler height gauge. And the reason for this is you want to standardize the knuckle height so that it's standard throughout all the cars on your train. Okay, reason being is you don't want them too high or too low because they'll have a tendency to uncouple when you don't want them to uncouple. Okay, so we know what our main goal is here, and what we're going to do is we're going to take this caboose that is a basic Athearn kit caboose that was specially done for me and weathered by a friend of mine who does custom painting by the name of Fred Merritt, who lives here in Watertown. And what I'm going to do is to add the couplers. Now, what I've done to speed this up a little bit is taken off the trucks and the coupler, the caps to the couplers. What I'm going to do right now is the first step is to add the KD coupler spring, okay, into the pocket, okay? The pocket is already created by Athearn in this area right here, okay? Now, the reason for the spring, and I'll show it to you on the regular boxcar that is already completed. Okay, in order to get the boxcar coupler to operate, okay, it must have a springing motion, and it must, what we call it, a centering spring, and it must be able to, in whatever position it's in, is to center itself. As you can see, when I flip it, it'll automatically center itself, and that's the purpose of the spring. Okay, now the first thing I do is add the spring, make sure that it's in properly. The second thing I'm going to do is add the greasem. Okay, the greasem is added so it gives the coupler the flexibility to move. And what I've got to do right now is I just take the greasem. You can get it at the hobby shop, and it's KD. And what you do is you take the greasem and just tap it, tap, tap. You don't have to give much of a tap because it'll come right out. It's graphite. Okay. The next thing you do is you get your KD coupler, and I've got one right here, and as you notice, this is the way the KD coupler looks before you put it on. This is the trip pin. What happens is when it uncouples and when you go over the magnet and stop on the magnet will touch the trip pin and automatically open it up. Now that I've added my graphite, my spring, to the coupler pocket, I'm going to add the coupler. Make sure that you place the coupler after burnishing it, okay? And burnishing the coupler means to take a burnishing tool, or in this case, I'm using a screwdriver with some greasem, and burnish the greasem or the graphite into the front of the coupler head, like such, so that when the coupler is used with another coupler, it does not impede the operation. Okay, now I'm going to place the coupler with the trip pin facing up, because when we switch the unit around, this trip pin will be on the track side. Oops. Okay. So to prevent that from happening, what I'm going to do is to take the Athearn coupler pad and place it right on top here. Okay. Now we've got the coupler on. We'll see if it works. Well, must be I've done something right. And there it flips. The spring is in operation. The coupler moves right back to its centering position. Okay, what I'm going to do now, normally what we do is put the other coupler on, but to save time, what I'm going to do is put the trucks back on and put it up to see how the coupler height is. Okay? Okay, now, are you ready? We're going to place it on the track to test the height, okay? Okay. Coupler height is good. Doesn't look like we have to do anything to the trip pin either. Okay, because it clears the plate on the bottom.
Yeah, see, that's like that.
Okay, there we are.
Couple of more club members here that we enjoy having with us. Vinny Scordo, and of course the youngest member of our club, his young son, David. And Vinny does a lot of what we call custom work. He paints and decals and letters and weathers his locomotives and his cars to the way he wants them for a particular railroad. In this case, New York Central, which I happen to lean in that direction too. Good choice, Vinny.
I thought so.
Yeah, excellent choice. Vinny's got a box cab diesel here that he did way back. This is one of the very first diesel engines they ever had back in the 30s or
About
the 20s?
1920s, yeah.
And this was just a plain metal kit. And Vinny, I'll let you go ahead and tell them what you did.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Well, what we got here, folks, is a box cab diesel. It's representative of a locomotive that was used by the New York Central Railroad to haul passenger trains from Harmon, New York into Grand Central Station. The reason being they didn't allow steam locomotives in New York City limits because of the smoke and the soot. So the New York Central had the idea of using an electric locomotive to eliminate that problem. And what I've done here is from a book on the New York Central Railroad. I took an article and a photograph and tried to approximate the locomotive that was used at that time period. And what I did, I took a basic kit manufactured by Model Die Casting, and I took the shell, stripped it, and using a picture as a guide, I repainted it, re-lettered it for the appropriate lettering for that time period, and highlighted the handrails and the grab irons and the side of the locomotive where the crew would use to climb in and out of the unit. And it is a very fair representation of that locomotive. And what I did is I modified the windows according to the picture, and like I say, using the picture as a guide, I replicated the locomotive as closely as possible to the prototype. And another aspect of the hobby is something called kit bashing. And what kit bashing is almost exactly like what it sounds. It's taking two kits and bashing them together. For example, this New York Central caboose is a 19,000 series caboose. It was made from two different kits, using components of each to make into the best kit possible to replicate the caboose of that time period. And I took the floor from one kit and the underside, assembled it, modified it, and used the sides, the roof, and all the roof detail from the other kit, and I custom painted it by hand and lettered it and put the appropriate safety yellow railings and grab irons on there. And my son David is also into model railroading, and he's beginning to do his own work. And my other son Anthony, who's not with us today, also does the same thing. We work together on it, and we enjoy it very much. And we're all New York Central fans. Coming into view right now, we have a New York Central passenger train pulled by the New York Central's famous locomotive, the J3A Hudson, pulling a heavyweight consist of a passenger train approximately in the 1930s. This was a type of train that typically ran on the New York Central, and it was pulled by the most famous locomotive of the Central, and most of their premier passenger trains were pulled by this engine. And these coaches replicate the type of coaches the New York Central used, which is called a heavyweight coach. These are basically an Athearn kit, and all I did to them was to paint the roofs, add the appropriate coupler and diaphragms on the end of the cars. And as I say, it is a very good representation of a typical passenger train used by the New York Central.
Another member of the club that we're certainly glad is with us is former president of the club, Don Pitts. Don is a semi-retired architect, right, Don?
Right.
And Don has done some great work here on kit bashing. Now, that's taken a standard kit, engine, or car, and developing it to look like a particular railroad. In this case, Don models the Chicago and Northwestern. He's got a beautiful station that he's took two kits and put together to make, and he's got all kinds of buildings here in the street scene, plus his rolling stock and his locomotives. And Don, I'll let you tell just a little bit about how you did these things.
Okay, Mike. Well, let's start with the locomotives. So we have two that we've set up here. This is out of the box. They come in different paint schemes, but that's just the way this one looked, except for the color when I bought it. And it doesn't look like a Chicago Northwestern locomotive. So first thing, it's got a new pilot, which some people call cow catchers, that I happen to have left over from another project. And you can see the domes are a little different. I cut the domes off and reworked the boiler a bit. This one came from the kit. This one is scratch built out of layers of styrene plastic. The headlight is a brass casting that's more accurate for the type the Northwestern used. I built a new cab for it because the other one was not close. The running gear is as is. I don't like to get fooling with that. I did put on new running boards and new piping, which is probably a little hard to see. The tender is cut down in length, and these upper parts of the sides there where they contains the coal are also scratch built to make it look a little different. And then of course it's painted, weathered a little bit. You see looks a little grayish down close to the track and up in the front of the boiler.
Eric's Books wants you to join us Friday.
And that's about it. Took a while, but then we have a baggage car. Actually, this kit came with open platforms on the end, but that wasn't what I wanted, so I just built it without them. And it's weathered a bit, so it looks like it's been around a few years and seen a lot of service. This car is a lounge car, roughly based on one that was used on the Northwestern back in the steam era. And then I actually made it out of two dining car kits. Cut them in half and glued them together, and so you had the wide windows on each end. and then of course it's painted and decaled and everything. And then we come to the station. That was a kit based on the station in Bonn, Germany, and it didn't quite have the character that I wanted, and had kind of a European look to it, so I rearranged the parts basically. The little marquee is added, that's scratch built, and this little extension on the end where the taxi cab was added out of leftover parts of the kit, actually, with its own marquee. The original kit actually had a low section on each side of the center and then a higher section on the end, and I rearranged it and used most of the pieces. And the vehicles are various types of kits. This bus is right out of the box, but it just came out recently, and kind of like the looks of it. And we bought a bunch of them here. The taxi cabs come as a piece of plastic, molded but not painted or anything, so painted those and decaled them. Some of these cars are out of the box, and this little Chevy was painted. It's a 57 Chevy, I believe, and that's a metal one. So.
And of course, we are a railroad club, and with any club, we have officers. Over here, Jan Keene, our president, and Ron Johnson here, our secretary-treasurer. Now, besides being officers, they also model, naturally, and they've got together and have built a logging layout, a switchback, to go up the side of the mountain. And I'll let the guys tell you about their layout that they built. Go ahead, fellas.
Okay, Jan, go ahead. Well, this is 3 modules, 4 feet long, 30 inches wide. They start out with a plywood base, 1/2-inch plywood, and then the landforms are built out of layers of 1-inch blue styrofoam insulation, which are glued one on top of the other and then contoured. This is under construction. It's not finished. It's got a ways to go yet. But what it depicts is a logging line which goes from a interchange with the mainline trains down here on this level to the top of the mountain where the logging and mining operations are taking place. And the way the train gets to the top of the mountain is by a series of switchbacks. And a switchback is a way to gain elevation in a minimum amount of space. So the train basically goes back and forth. Each time it climbs, and it stops, reverses directions, climbs to the next one until it reaches the top of the mountain. We start from the level down here where we'll have our lumber mill, our company town, processing for the lumber, and the train goes